Periodically, one comes to the realization that one is in need of a profuse quantity of pinstriped articles in one's wardrobe, and so, upon locating the perfect variety of stripe, one might begin with a simple 1890s waistcoat. The pattern for this is an unholy amalgamation of my draft from the instructions in the 1895 Keystone jacket and dress cutter, along with the Black Snail's Victorian waistcoat pattern to supplement some of the extra pieces that Keystone doesn't tell you about. Pocket pieces and facings and belt ties and such. This video is made possible by Brooklinen, the Brooklyn-based home essentials brand founded on the philosophy that people deserve simple, beautiful home essentials without the luxury markup. Brooklinen is offering my viewers $20 off any purchase over $100 using my code Bernadette at the link below. We spend around 1/3 of our lives in sheets, so it stands to reason that these should be as comfortable as possible. But while luxury brand sheets may cost you upward of $400, Brooklinen cuts out the middleman to bring you gloriously comfy sheets at a fraction of the cost. And with over 20 color and pattern options to choose from, they are sure to look great. I've got Brooklinen's Luxe Hardcore Sheet Bundle, which consists of a full set of beautiful 480 thread count cotton sateen bedding, So satin, which we usually think of as this shiny, luxurious, silky material, is actually the name for a type of weave not exclusive to the silk fiber alone, in which rather than passing over and under a single thread at a time, the weft floats over 3 or more of the warp yarns, exposing more of the surface of the weft for a smoother surface. This is effectively what gives silk satin its characteristic shine. Essentially, cotton sateen is cotton threads made up in this satin weave, making for the most wonderfully soft and smooth bedding. Bet you didn't think you were getting a small textile lecture as part of an ad read, now did you? And I can attest they are indeed the most gloriously comfy sheets I have owned, enabling the ideal nap experience to fuel long hours in the workroom. Once again, Brooklinen is offering my viewers $20 off any purchase over $100 using my code Bernadette. See the link below. This one I decided I wanted to be a double-breasted waistcoat, so it's got 2 rows of buttons instead of just the one. And I also wanted to make it a shawl collar, which means the lapel bit is rounded instead of peaked with the little notch in it. That, of course, involved a little bit of adjusting my original pattern, extending this front bit to be a double-breasted front bit, as well as I put on the rounded shawl collar. I've taken out one of the darts because this front bit is wider. So anyway, these are the pieces that I came up with. I have 2 front pieces. I decided to do that thing where you cut the back of the waistcoat out of a lining fabric, so this is just a cotton silesia. I also had to cut some facing pieces, so these are front facing pieces that will attach to that front bit and turn so that the lapel, there's fabric on the lapel. Oh yes, I also have to cut some canvas, and that will probably just be extrapolated off of this main front pattern. Oh yeah, I also wanted to put a watch pocket in this. So that's gonna be a thing that I will have to figure out. But anyway, I'm going to get on with cutting the rest of this so that we can actually start putting this together. Before I can begin putting all the pieces together, I'm first going through and thread marking all of my chalk lines, primarily because chalk doesn't tend to stick around very long on wool surfaces, and I don't want to risk losing my lines before I can get to stitching. But also because tailored items such as jackets and waistcoats often have a lot of additional markings for darts and buttonholes and pockets and such. These of course will need to be seen from both the front and back sides of the fabric. This is done with a long basting stitch, so it doesn't take very long, and I find it quite relaxing really. I also did this thing where I marked out my button placement before making it into a 3-dimensional garment, so I could actually get them evenly spaced, which I very highly recommend. The button side at least did end up needing to be moved to align better with the buttonholes later, but I did at least end up with very nicely even buttonhole placement. I'm beginning by getting the back pieces put together first, stitching in the 2 back darts and then stitching up the center back seam. I'm not planning to line this just to keep it as lightweight as possible, so I'm just pinking the edges of the center back seam allowance to stop it from fraying. I also made up 2 little strap pieces that will act as the back strap adjustment, foolishly without buying the buckle first. So I was inventing the width of this, which ended up being a bit too narrow for the buckle I ended up buying, so do not as I do. Now to begin the long and arduous, just kidding, it's actually quite satisfying I think, journey of structuring the front of the waistcoat, beginning by cross-stitching the darts in place to shape it to the fabric pieces. So I have completed my basting of these canvas pieces into the fronts of the waistband. This basically just consisted of putting 1 long vertical strip of basting in here just to hold it vertically. I then did the basting to hold this curve out this way, 1 around the arm side, 1 around this bit here which shapes the waist, and then finally I did the roll line. I've also taken this pocket marking here and transferred it over to the canvas so that I can see that from the back side. I only really know how to do double welt pockets, and from the majority of the Victorian waistcoats that I've been looking at, those seem to be single welt pockets, which I think is actually the easier way to do it, but I've just never done a single welt pocket before, but I feel like I should probably do it. That's what the majority of waistcoats. But before I do the pocket, probably I'm going to procrastinate that for a little bit. I am first just going to go through, and I've already started on this side, but I'm just going to put little stays in, and I've just created these little, this is from the synthetic whalebone that I usually use, but I know a lot of modern plastic boning comes already in casings like this, but I just made these out of 2 strips of cotton tape that I just stitched together. And these I will put in just over top of the dart seams down here. These are really great to give you that flat front, straight, smooth, corset-y shape without any actual waist reduction. Sometimes people actually do want waist reduction in their garments, for obvious reasons. This is also a really common technique. I know lots of Edwardian blouses, all through the Victorian period as well. They just have these little stays stitched into the fronts of their garments just to give them a little bit more structure. I'm also then going to get the pad stitching on the lapels, which if you've seen me do tailoring projects before, you will probably know this stage of the process, but it's basically just going to be hours and hours and hours of very, very fine pad stitching as I slowly bend this around my fingers, get it to take that nice folded back curve and just pad stitch that into shape. If you don't do that, then the lapels will just sort of flop forward and want to sit flat like this. You really want them to fold over like that and stay folded over, and that's what the pad stitching does. Then I guess at some point I will tackle the pocket. I'm also stitching a linen stay tape at the arm's eye and along the roll line to stabilize these points. I have also, at this point, seamed together the 2 front pieces at the neck edge so that I can also add a stay tape all around the outer edge of these pieces so that the waistcoat will have nice, crisp edges. It is at this point that I made the fatal decision to watch a certain episode of a certain TV series, which catapulted me down a hole in pursuit of another project. So, 3 months later, I am now just tracing my back arm's eye curves to cut out some facing pieces, since I realized that the lack of lining in this back part would otherwise mean that the arm's eye edges would be unfinished. I'm now stitching the front to the back at the shoulder and across the neck. This is a notoriously finicky seam to sew, and I'm unashamedly just stitching the shoulder, neck, and shoulder individually here, not even trying to navigate the sharp corners by machine. These corners I am finishing by hand with the backstitch so that I can make sure everything is positioned in exactly the right place and I won't risk catching unwanted material by the machine. Now to make up the watch pocket. The welt, or that small rectangular piece which will be seen from the outside, is just pressed in half, and the crease is strengthened with a length of narrow linen tape, which has just been cross-stitched into place. The bottom edge of this is stitched to the top edge of one of my pocket shapes. The top edge of the welt is then pinned to the bottom of my pocket marking on the outside of the waistcoat, and the other side of the pocket bag is stitched to the top edge of the pocket marking. Both are then stitched. After cutting an opening down the middle, both pocket pieces are slipped through to the inside, and this is secured down by stitching in that seam from the front. Then I can stitch my pocket bags together, top stitch the short ends down from the front, and I have a finished watch pocket. Before I can put the lining in and finish this up, I'm first just going to add a bit of cotton padding to the upper chest area. This was super common historically in everything from tailored garments to evening gowns to bodices all throughout the 19th century. It was fashionable to have a smooth, rounded chest, which isn't often how human shoulders work, so these kidney-shaped pads are very often used to fill out the hollow just under the shoulder space. When I tell you that the Victorians and Edwardians were masters of illusion, I am not joking. In many cases, according to the clothes that survived to us, we can see that many of their figures were entirely fake. Now I can begin closing this up by stitching the front-facing pieces to the outer edge of the front pieces so that I have a nice matching surface to show when the lapels roll back. The outer edges of the waistcoat are then top stitched to ensure a nice crisp edge. Traditionally, this is done by hand with a small running stitch. Now I can insert the final lining pieces, which first must be stitched at the armscye to finish the front armscye edges. These can then be pinned to match up with the facing pieces and the side seams and felled into place by hand. And thus I am pleased to bring you the completed waistcoat, which I love most ardently and which I shall most certainly be wearing profusely. I absolutely love historical tailored garments like this because they are often so still familiar to the modern eye. They're very easy to wear just casually in modern situations, whilst also giving you that really quintessential historical flair. These structured garments are so easy to, well, structure and manipulate and build out to give you such a great historical silhouette. As you saw in the video, there is padding used in these. There are those little stays at the front to give it that corsety look. I should note, by the way, I'm not corseted in this final reveal sequence. My natural waist measures 26 inches, which is not, unreasonably small, but you can still really trick the eye into perceiving that quintessentially hourglass late Victorian, early Edwardian shape by, of course, using the chest padding, but I have also paired this with a skirt under which I am wearing hip padding and bustle padding, and that, of course, helps to build out that Victorian body ideal, which is not incidentally a specific set of measurements that one should aim to achieve for. It is instead a ratio or a proportion. It is the bust being 10 inches larger than the waist, which is 15 inches smaller than the hips, and so long as you can sort of balance that ratio, you can get a really great late Victorian, early Edwardian turn of the century silhouette. And this was achieved historically unashamedly through any method possible, either with padding built into your clothing or into your corset, also with hip and bustle padding. And of course with corsetry. Some people, of course, would tight lace down to achieve that silhouette, but most people didn't find that comfortable, so they would just wear their corset normally as just a fundamental structural garment, but not actually lace it down to take significant reduction off the waist. Instead, they would pad out the bust and the hips. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this little venture into tailoring, and on that note, I shall see you back here, if you so choose, anon.